Welcome to Secrets from the Scene, a show for local musicians who want to improve their music, grow their audience, and learn about Minnesota's music scene. If you're interested in talking about all things music related and meeting interesting people from our local community, you're in the right place. Welcome to Secrets from the Scene. On today's episode, I'm joined by Colin Bracewell. I met Colin back when he was in high school a few years ago. He just recently graduated college, which is a huge accomplishment. I'm so happy to have him here today because I've gotten to watch him over the last 4 years, his journey through the Twin Cities music scene. And he's really developed an awesome live show. His songwriting's got better. Everything's kind of come together, and I want to dive into what that journey's been like up to this point, what it feels like to be 22 in the heart of the indie pop scene here in the Twin Cities, playing shows, figuring out how to grow a fan base, figuring out how to reach more people, what works, what doesn't work. And I think Colin's a great representation of a sort of cross-section of that would look like here in the Twin Cities. So thank you, Colin, for being here. And everybody, please welcome Colin.
I'm stupid and lonely, so please don't say sorry. I did this and I want you to know that I hate this about me. Thought this love was for me, but it isn't. And I want you to know that when you go, left me so low.
Hello, everyone. I'm super happy to be here.
Well, first of all, congratulations on finishing school.
Thanks. Yeah, it feels good. It feels everything that's been happening right now is just happening. Trying to treat it as just everything's happening and has happened for a reason. And I think that when I ended school, I took an extra semester than from the typical 4 years. And I think that was just super necessary for my personal growth, also especially my growth as a artist and as a songwriter, and just the opportunities that I have now weren't there, I guess, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, by the time that I probably would have quote unquote graduated on time or, correctly. So I'm really happy about all of that happening, and excited to see what this new year brings just for music, because I don't really see myself doing anything else right now.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
What is next? Like, what are you working on coming out of this graduation?
A lot of performing. So I graduated with a vocal performance degree and a marketing degree. And that vocal performance degree is on like classical singing. So actually right when I graduated, I started rehearsal with the Minnesota Opera, doing chorus with them for L'Elisir d'Amore. And so that's been really exciting, just being in a group and surrounded by individuals that are just, I'm the youngest person in there probably by around 4 or 5 years. And it's just really cool to just be surrounded by people that are way better than you, or like kind of at that level that you're at, where like I've had just music theory and just constant learning rep and everything. So my sight reading and everything is just a little bit sharper, as if maybe someone who's been out of school or taking, theory for like, 20, 30 years, some of these people. So it's very inspiring to just, and like, that it's just really going well when just time flies during rehearsal. A 3-hour rehearsal feels like an hour. Yeah, it's been really cool to kind of have like, okay, this is my first professional gig out of school, and just trying to soak as much as I can out of these next few months with them.
Do you anticipate trying to keep doing more of these types of gigs in the classical world?
I think if the opportunity comes, and it is really hard because a lot of this whole thing is planning ahead, but a lot of it is also just like spur of the moment, like, oh, I'm going to take this opportunity,
Yeah.
So the great thing about this opportunity was I got it last March. I knew that I was going to do it, and it's only a 2-month, 3-month commitment.
Okay.
And that's really nice because I was like, okay, like I can plan this out and I can, do stuff after and before that. So yeah, it'll really depend on the rest of this spring and going into summer, my plans. because auditions for the next year are this upcoming March. And then I kind of have to see, am I going to commit to living in the Twin Cities for another year? I mean, that's kind of the thing that I got to juggle right now. But I do like performing. And I think as long as I'm performing, I think I'll be okay with that. But there's an element of like just staying here. Like you have to close yourself off to some opportunities when you commit to like a 3-month project.
Yeah. You're at that age where there's kind of wide open.
Yeah.
Right? Where there's a lot of different directions.
Trying to keep it wide open.
Yeah. That's exciting though. That's cool to be able to dip your feet into that world for a few months and then back out and just see where the wind blows, I guess. You know?
And also like I use my degree for like performing my singer-songwriting stuff for sure. And especially when I songwrite, like I am using my degree, and even my marketing degree I use whenever I am like putting on the artist hat and booking shows and all that stuff. So I am using it, but it is really nice to be like, okay, I'm using my classical performance degree and getting paid to do it. And like, that's a really cool, rewarding feeling to have. So I'm glad I'm doing that. We'll just see how long and what other opportunities come along. So
yeah. Well, I had meant to introduce more of your background in the bio, and I just skipped right past it.
Yeah,
but you're originally from Windsor,
I was
Ontario.
born on Windsor, Ontario, Canada. That's correct. And then I grew up in Fresno, California.
Okay.
And then I moved to Stillwater when I was middle school.
Okay.
So like 13. Yeah. And then after Stillwater, I went to the University of Minnesota, and now I live in Minneapolis, and part of this great little scene that we have. So
yeah. Well, you and I met when you were in high school, and you were just kind of getting started.
Figuring it out.
Yeah. Obviously, you'd been playing music, but I don't think you had a band at that point yet. So what I want to really kind of dig into today is that journey for you of like figuring out the very first steps of putting a band together and then starting to play your first shows all the way up to today, where you now have a nice fan base. Things are going well. You're getting bigger opportunities each and every year. So why don't you take us back to the beginning of where the band part started? Because you perform solo and with the band.
Yeah, so I think the very beginning of like songwriting, performing, all of that, I mean, that was like going into 10 years, it would be like 10 years from this summer. I got asked to join like a cover band. We were all in middle school. Yeah. Trying to figure it out, trying to show off. Essentially, that's really what
I've been there.
What you're doing.
I've been there.
So I did that, and that introduced me to songwriting, just to not so much like the Minneapolis scene quite yet, but just like to more than just my musical theater brain and my, just like very surface level knowledge of just music and making music. So I joined a few cover bands just kind of growing up, and we had a few gigs, and it was cool, but it wasn't anything that like we were taking seriously at all, obviously. Yeah. So I did that probably all the way until sophomore year of high school. At that point, I was like, okay, like both of these bands aren't really doing anything, and I don't really like the idea of having to get told no when I am writing something. That's kind of the challenge of a band, is like, it's a collaborative process, and there are a lot of benefits to that, but there are a lot of downsides of just like, oh, well, I really feel good about something, and it just your idea gets shelved, So I think that's when I was like, okay, I'm not totally ready to go into like a solo singer songwriting thing. Cause really, I mean, when I was in high school, I didn't even know that was possible. I saw people that were like 22, 23, kind of the age that I'm at now, doing that. And I was like, okay, that's just so far away from me. So I'll just kind of focus on whatever. And so I just made another band that was like, I was the main songwriter, but it wasn't my name or anything. And so I really didn't get to the point until it was like, I'd say like high school, late high school. I was like, okay, maybe I'll do more solo stuff by myself. But I definitely don't think that I had it figured out. Like I'd probably only written like 5-10 songs during that time. And now looking back at it, like those songs they weren't great. They weren't good. but like I mean, everything happens for a reason, like I had to write those songs to like eventually be at where I'm at. So that kept on going. And then I think I stayed in that band until probably the end of high school. And then I was like, okay, I'm going into university and started getting a taste of this like Minneapolis scene. Yeah, I would definitely say like going to the University of Minnesota definitely introduced me to all of that. And then, yeah, I became a DJ at the college radio station.
Oh, okay. I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, so I did that for, I think it was a year and a half. And then that introduced me to a bunch of people that are just in bands and like multiple projects and everything. And so I was like, whoa, this is...
Was that Radio K?
That was Radio K.
Yeah.
So I did that. Yeah, so I think right like my freshman year, I think I played like my first gig like with just a dude that I met that was working like the front desk there. And I was like, oh, you're in a band? Like I'm in a band, So I just pieced together a band from musicians that I'd play with in high school. And then we played our first gig. I think it was at Acadia, right on Cedar.
Yep.
So I did that. And I mean, all those songs and everything now, like I don't play them. I hardly even remember them anymore. I try not to remember them.
Yeah.
But I think that was my first taste of like doing this more of a solo project. And then since then, it kind of just spiraled. And then I got my first like real gig, I'd say, was like March of 2020. I opened for an artist at the Entry, 7th Street Entry. I think the date was March 13th, 2020. And then a day later, the venue shut down.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we were on like an extended spring break. Life was great, for like a month. And then we were like, okay, this is an ending.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think it was like a year off of just like, you can't really do much performing. I mean, I'd just been songwriting and living, and then we played some more gigs as things started coming up again. And then I really was like, okay, I'm going to headline the 7th Street Entry because, I had that relationship figured out before. And that was incredible. And it still is one of the best venues of the Twin Cities. And then we headlined, I think July or something of 2021. And we played with Gowns and Dury. And I met both of those bands because I was really into producing at the time. And I interned at a studio called Tangerine Studios. With Jack over there. And so I just like sat in on his sessions. I, plugged in some, XLR cables and just kind of sat there really. And I just like tried to learn what this actual process is. And especially at that time, I mean, Gowns was definitely a little bit younger compared to Dury. I mean, as a band, they were young, but Austin, when I had met him, he'd been in projects for, probably the past 15 years. So he knew, I mean, he came in with a full demo of everything recorded and figured out.
Yeah.
And then he just went in and they just re-recorded everything. And I was like, oh my God, like this is so different from what I thought the studio recording process was like, in just from the experience of me just plugging in stuff and us working together and stuff and figuring it out. It seemed like he had figured stuff out.
Yeah.
So yeah, we played the Entry the first time and then we sold that out and that was such a cool experience. And then ever since then, it's been just like playing shows. We headlined another time the next summer and sold that one out as well. And then that's been the journey.
That's where you are now. Yeah.
That's where we are now.
Yeah. Well, okay. I want to recap a little bit of that because I think it's worth discussing how absolutely normal that is essentially. And for people, because I want this episode to be for people that are particularly trying to get in to the scene, right? Maybe they're in high school right now and they're like, they have that feeling of that just feels so far away, but it's not.
It's not.
It's a necessary part of the process where you have your instrument, you start writing. Yes, those songs are probably very bad. It's the same way with everybody. Everybody feels the same way. It may not be bad to you right now, but in a few years, you're going to look back and go, no, I can do that a lot better.
Hopefully that isn't the case for a little bit for the stuff that I'm making right now, but you're right. You're right.
That's a part of it. You just have to, because as you go and you take those little opportunities with the people that are around you, whether it's people you met in high school or in college, you start writing, and each one of those songs gives you a little bit more confidence to do the next thing, And I think you becoming a DJ while you were at college was such a great move because it got you way deeper into the community and it expanded your network immediately. So now you had some choices of people that you wanted to maybe get to know better, you wanted to maybe collaborate with, and that can just lead to then building up the band that you have now. Did you get all those guys through college?
I met my drummer when I was I think I met him like summer of high school going into college. So he went to Woodbury and he knew me or found out about me through, I was in jazz band in high school. And so I think we both went to like the Eau Claire Jazz Fest. And I think that like triggered a like, oh, I know you and you know me, but we have never met. And then I just went into, he worked at Music Around at the time. And so I just went in buying, I don't know, strings or something. And then he was like, you look so familiar. And I was like, I think I was playing gigs like I didn't do that many of these gigs, but I probably did like 2 or 3 gigs where it was just me by myself and I had this big kick drum. And I kind of did this like Shaky Graves kind of vibe where it was like, banging the kick drum and playing and doing all this stuff. And I remember I did that at Cadence. And then, he came to the show and he's like, hey, if you ever need a drummer. And I was like, hey,
Do you want more than a kick drum?
Yeah, I think I might need one, And then we just kind of hung out after that, played. I wasn't playing shows at the time, really, and
well, not a lot, but you were trying.
I was trying, yeah.
But that's kind of what I mean about this journey thing is like, there's not necessarily a plan. You just kind of keep stumbling forward.
You just do.
Yeah, whatever happens, it's like, okay, I met this person that opened up this door. Let's try this thing. You've along the way, played in these cover bands. You've played in school ensembles. You're doing some solo shows. You do a show with one other person that you meet here. You're trying different things. And all of those different shows then point to, that was fun. I want to do that again. Or that wasn't.
Totally.
And I needed to change it. That's what I mean is like, I think when people from the outside in are trying to get into this thing, they can look at it and go, go to the 7th Street entry to go to Colin's sold out show and go like, that's where he started.
Oh,
and it's not, because that is still relatively early in your journey. And at some point you're going to do a podcast in the future and you're going to skip past all that stuff. You're going to start at 7th Street entry.
Totally.
Because that's going to start to feel like the beginning. So I think that it's just important to say that you have to just dive in and take what you can get, even if it's not where your dreams are. It's fine. You just start there because it will point you down the next path. Because you're going to go, that worked or it didn't work, and then move forward. There's really no other way to do it unless somebody sets it up for you. If you join somebody's band.
Yeah.
But if you are potentially the singer-songwriter in a group, I think that's kind of what you have to do.
Absolutely. And it's a lot of, you're right, like figuring out what you like, what you don't like in so many capacities.
Yeah.
Not just venues. I mean, band members, the songs that you write, the stuff that you say and don't say, and
that's why I want to have you on, because I know you've gone through that stuff. In fact, when we worked together, I know you were going through it then. And I just think that you've done a really nice job curating your sound, your look, and your band, right? And so let's break that down a little bit. Talk to me about how the band functions, because I know that it's already going to be a little bit tricky doing stuff solo and with band, and when you decide and how you balance all those shows and that kind of thing. Like, I want to kind of start at the beginning of this process, which is, assembling the people that you play with, right? The project's Colin Bracewell. You're clearly a solo artist, but you have a band that you've been playing with, and the band's fantastic. And I know that that's always like a balancing act. I'm sure when solo gigs come in, you just take those, right?
Yeah.
And then for the band stuff, obviously that's fun. That's, I think, a lot of fun to have the band play.
Yeah, the dream is to always play every show with my full band every time, because it's way more interesting for the audience in my mind, and it's way more interesting just as a player. I mean, even if it's just one other person, I have so much more fun playing with them, and like I've realized too that when people go to our shows, they like that other element that we bring, that like just human aspect, I mean, we banter on stage and there's like, little just jokes, or like, oh, someone messed up there, or someone did something that they don't normally do. And audiences pick up on that. And that's what makes them go, oh my gosh, like that extra element was so cool. As opposed to, I mean, really, why go to a show if you're just going to hear the recorded track, I guess. You know, I mean, that's something that I've been really thinking about is, you know, there is an element. I know there's two sides for sure. But there's a point that it's like, well, you know, I'd rather just listen to them if it's really just going to be karaoke, essentially. You know, I mean, people have different philosophies and stuff, and I definitely lean towards more of like I'd rather an artist play a strip set than an artist who's solo and has their track playing behind them and just is singing along, you know, because really, I mean, I can listen to that, either have them doing a live session of that, or I can just go on Spotify and listen to that. Yeah. So for me personally, just having one other person or having my full band, that's where I definitely shine, and I know that audiences also see that.
The shared experience.
Yeah.
But there is, on the audience perspective, the shared experience of just listening to music with people.
Totally.
And so even if it is an artist playing over a track, for instance, the shared experience of doing that with your friends is why people do that. And
true.
And so I think it can work, but I tend to probably agree with you that I like the moment. I want to see it created. All right. So getting back to the band conversation, one thing I want to just kind of dig into quick is, you know, given that it's Colin Bracewell, clearly you're the leader, right? And so you're probably leading the way on that. How do you guys manage roles in terms of getting things done, booking shows? Is that all on you?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So I write all of the songs. I book all of the shows. Everything that gets posted is me. All the cover art is me. I mean, everything production wise, you know, I mean, that's pretty much me either having the last say of things or just going down on the computer and moving stuff around, you know?
Was that just sort of an upfront decision of like, hey, this is my project. Do you want to come play a part of it? Or did it evolve that way?
I think it's always been that. I think me being in the cover bands kind of taught me that.
Okay.
I think more so now it's just like so much easier just to be that on my own. You know, I mean, it used to be like, yeah, I'd have to book a session. I think originally it was like, yeah, I mean, I can songwrite by myself and everything, and then I'll go into a studio and do that. But, you know, that costs, and it's time consuming, and it's just a lot. And so I've learned to be like, okay, what's the most efficient for my time, and what am I capable of? And so, yeah, it's evolved to being more than just the songwriting thing, I guess, right now. But so far it's worked out that way. Like there hasn't been like a lacking thing right now. I mean, I think I'm definitely eager to working with other people on the producing side of things, but how it typically goes for songwriting, for example, is that I write a song or I write a batch of songs, and I either play them during rehearsal or I send demos in our group chat. And then I'm like, hey, listen to these, you know, think if you can come up with like a drum beat or a whatever.
Yep.
And then we show up to the next band practice. I either tell the bassist what the chords are, I tell him what the groove is of what I want him to play, and then he just kind of goes from there. And at that point, the drums, they don't really have a choice to do much else. I mean, there's a little bit where it's like you can be tighter or whatever, but then we just start learning the song. And luckily my bands, you know, they are good enough musicians where they are able to be creative, but then it's like, okay, I don't like that, or I like this hit here, like try that. And it normally takes at least one 2-hour rehearsal, and then we just run it. And then I come up with like the horn part as well. So that's been the process for songwriting. And then after that, it's like, okay, then we play the gigs in that arrangement. And then in turn, that makes the recording part easier, because then we're able to just go in and play what we play at shows.
Yeah.
And then, yeah. But no, at the end of the day, it is, I write all the songs, and there have been some parts where it's like, oh, my band sometimes wishes they had more input and they express that, and that opportunity hasn't really come up yet where we've all sat down and written a song together.
Sure.
I think just because people are just busy with their own time and everything. And I mean, I literally every day, either when I go to sleep or wake up, I either think of a melody or I'm thinking music. And I mean, it's hard enough really to just like get into a room and rehearse for the gig that we have in 2 days, you know? So it's hard to like write as a group. And so that opportunity just hasn't really come up yet. I'm open to it, but efficiently just with the time that I have. I've been able to write and do everything on my own, and so far it's worked out.
Yeah, sounds like it's kind of evolved just by necessity. And
Totally.
partially also that's
It's convenient.
yeah, exactly. It's what you want to be doing, so that you're just leading the way naturally too. But okay, so talk to me then about how the recording process works for you guys.
So I've been able to collaborate with a few producers locally and not abroad, but in other, parts of the US. And that process has always been, I come with a song and then we just kind of take it from there. And it is really nice because then while they're working on the production side of things, I'm able to think more of like the actual melody components to the song, when they're adding like, I don't know, just like a synth part, or like I track the guitar part and then they're just playing that in a loop. I can kind of just riff off of that while they're sitting up there, editing stuff. And then I'm like, okay, I got this, sing it. If it's good, it stays. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And that tends to be the most efficient process for recording. And I am definitely looking towards more doing that in the future, just because I am just more confident with my songwriting and performance abilities as opposed to producing. But other times we just play a song for, I don't know, probably a couple of months and introduce it to shows and be like, hey, this is a new song. Let us know what you think. Play it, see what people think. Most of the time so far it's been like pretty positive. And then they're like, okay, let's go into the studio.
Yeah.
And then the live performance arrangement is the arrangement that we recorded in the studio. So it's typically bass gets DI'd and then drums. So just kind of the rhythm section gets tracked. Like for example, my latest song that I put out, Julia, we just went into a studio, tracked everything live. Trumpet was in like a separate room. And then once that happened, I got the stems and got the edited drum tracks, and then I just re-recorded the guitars because that was isolated. Really, the only reason why we're in the room is to just get the feel of the live thing and hearing my vocals and everything for everyone, just so we're all together. And then, I go back, record. I mean, the majority of my time is recording vocals, recording my main vocal. And I record that over the bass and the drums. And then, I'm just like sitting in my basement in my house and track all my layers of guitars and track background vocals and main vocals. And then other like little ear candies. Like just random synths or just stuff that's kind of spur of the moment things.
Yeah.
It's taken me a while to get to that point, but it's really nice to be at that point because it just saves money.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. So first of all, how much of the process, and you can answer this in multiple ways if it's changed over the years, but how much of the process are you doing on your own, and how much of the process are you relying on an engineer or producer?
Hours wise?
Or percentage?
Yeah, percentage wise, I guess 10% of it is like relying on an engineer, I would say.
So most of it is
me just tracking, retracking different guitar parts and just like, okay, making a new version of this project and a new version and a new version.
Yeah.
And that way of doing things is super inefficient, and I get very in my head about that stuff, as I feel like most people would do. But that's how I've done it, is like I get those stems and just condense them, export it, and then I just like make guitar parts on top of that and just
do you just do that in Logic?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then that takes me, like Julia probably took me, that's the thing, is so I started tracking it on my own, thinking that I would just do it on a click and then we'd have rhythm section go behind it. But then I realized that that's just a lot harder to do, and just like that song specifically just felt that there was a groove that it needed to be a part of. So I just scrapped everything. I still had the ideas in my head of like, okay, these are the guitar parts that I like, but we just spent a day in a studio and it took 5 hours, and it wasn't even a studio. I mean, it was a treated room, but it was one of my friends' just practice spaces. So we didn't even have to pay for the room. I just paid for the engineer just to press record and edit too. I mean, drum editing is just like a whole nother beast.
Yeah.
And then I took those and then condensed them and then just spent probably the next month and a half, 2 months just working on it every day and seeing what I like and what I don't like and talking to different friends who also create music.
I think that process is good for some reasons, and then I'm kind of curious if it's, where you want to be going, because on one hand, it's great to spend that kind of time because you start to understand the engineering aspect of things.
Mhm.
There's a lot of creativity in just building a track that way and spending time with it, breaking it down. You get to wrestle with your own creative tendencies, your tastes, play with things, try out stuff, throw it away, try something new. So
Yeah.
if you know just enough to be dangerous on Logic, it can be really fun to start honing in a sound if you have that kind of control. But the dark side of that is it can go on and on and on, and you can get in your head and you not know where it's done. So you've clearly spoken about both sides of that so far. Do you, looking ahead now that you've done that for a couple of years, you've got some really cool recordings out, do you want to do more of it on your own? Are you working towards being able to be fully independent? Or would you like to eventually do more where you could just have a collaborator that's like going to engineer and fix things for you and fix the problems and not do all the heavy lifting? Do you enjoy having all the control, or do you want to find the right?
Yeah, I mean, I've figured out what I enjoy and what I don't enjoy.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of things that I am very independent at already. And so I think that I've learned that I can do this thing, but I don't find it's not the most fulfilling. I'd much rather have someone else do it. But in order for me to not only figure out and pick out what I like from some person's way of engineering or producing, I had to do it on my own. I had to spend just the money and the time of going into a studio and wasting hours trying to track a live piano that ended up not even getting onto the track, but we spent a whole day trying to mic it up and set it up. I had to do that to know that, okay, I don't need to do that next time for me.
Yeah.
I
think that's the point that I'm getting at, is that you've gone through a lot of trial and error, right? And there's trial and error with how to run your band. There's trial and error with how to record a song. There's all of that.
Yeah.
And I think to some extent, just like the trial and error of writing your early songs and playing in the cover band and trying this, play it with the kick drum, and you're like, that's all part of the journey. As you start to go, okay, I don't like this, I like this. And if you have a mentor, you have your brother's in an older band or something like that, to some extent, you might be able to skip some of that, or you might just copy the way somebody else did it because they've already been through it. But if you haven't, I think the journey that you're going on right now is perfectly normal. And so I just want to get into like your perspective on what parts of it are like, this is what was worth it. This trial and error was totally worth it, and what wasn't,
Yeah. I mean, I would say, for producing at this very moment, I am very excited to work with other individuals because I know that I can do it, but I also know that I now have time and just knowledge and expertise, I guess, in the songs that I am writing now to be like, okay, I'm just going to do this right now, and I really want to work with these individuals that have been creating the things that I've been listening to for the past 5 years. And actually, I can get their email and they're actually like, oh yeah, I know who you are and I really like what you're doing. Let's make something happen. That's been a really cool feeling that's finally happening that I could have done. I don't know. I think it's hard because like you don't know how far a DM can go, really. The people that I want to work with now and the people that I am working with now, I know why I want to work with them. Before, I was like, I like their music, but I definitely would say before, I think when I was like, oh, I really like this artist, the thing that was more so being told was, oh, I actually really like the engineer that this artist is working with, because piecing together all the music, at least locally, which is really what I'm dealing with right now, is there is a thread going through all the people that I'm like, oh, I really like this and this and this album and this album. And then I just look at the credits and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this person is on all of these songs.
Yeah.
And I used to think that this person was just someone that just did this one very niche thing, but then they actually have a lot bigger thing. So yeah, that's the thing that I'm toying with now. And then I don't really know how that landed to anything else. But I think like at this exact moment, I've also learned my type of songwriting route. I've learned that a lot of my songs that I end up putting out are ones that I spend 4 to 6 to a year working on, and not actively working on. Like I maybe came up with a melody hook like a year ago, and then I just would try and fit different verses and different stuff onto it. and then it would be like, okay, that didn't really stick, or, oh, I do really relate to this. Or there's a certain event that happens in my life, and I'm like, okay, this relates to this melody that I sang, and then I'm able to really finish it all in a day, And that's kind of an interesting spot to be at. I mean, right now, that based on the history that I've had, I know that like that's the way I do things. I've tried writing like 20, 30 songs in a month, and none of them are good. I mean, I did that pretty recently. I did that in November. Now looking back at it, and still there were some elements of those songs that I had written that still stay in my head. And actually recently I finished a song that started with one of those melodies that I wrote in November,
Oh, cool.
So I wrote this song because I was just like, okay, I have to write a verse, chorus, bridge, whatever thing. And then I didn't do anything with it. And then it just stuck around. And then I was like, I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, okay, I have this moment. And then I pieced together a song in like a day, and now I feel really good about it.
Yeah.
Like saying that like doesn't sound very efficient, but I think just the act of doing it clearly paid off. I mean, out of 30 songs, getting one song that like you actually really feel good about,
But I think that's kind of the point of this whole conversation, which is there isn't necessarily an efficient way. Maybe
that's truly authentic. I mean, there's efficient ways where people just find you and, you're like, oh, I'm going to make you whatever. And like, sometimes that does work out, but a lot of the time I'm very like skeptical of like, okay, how much of this is really you versus how much of this is someone else? And then a lot of the time those people end up, getting dropped by their label or management or something happens and they hate music.
There's an exception to everything.
Yeah.
But I would say that the idea that you just try a lot of things and make a lot of mistakes and make a lot of music that you don't end up putting out and that kind of stuff is okay. That's the whole point I'm trying to make. That is a part of it. It's necessary. And as long as you have the right attitude towards it, certain things get recycled. And then every little mistake becomes something that you go, okay, I know how to do this differently next time to get different results. To an extent, you just have to go through that and it's normal. So I'm enjoying hearing your thought process on how to go about it. Like first going and being an intern, like you said at Tangerine, and seeing somebody, oh man, they bring in fully recorded demos and just recreate it. Okay, that's interesting. To let's set up the band and get a groove, and then I'm going to take the stems and work and loop stuff at home and then decide how I want to do that. Like trying all of these different scenarios works for you because it allows you to figure out who you want to be. And beyond that, it gives you the ear and sort of the language
and the confidence
to then, if you are going to go hire a producer that you look up to, now you have a little bit more ability to actually communicate what you're going for. And you just wouldn't have gotten there without either somebody directly being able to teach you that, which sometimes happens. I do think that in this case, like having a mentor that was just a little bit further in your journey might have saved you some pain, maybe a little bit.
Couple grand,
But that's a little bit of why I'm doing the podcast too, is so that it can be a resource for people that are a few years behind you and listen and learn some of these things along the way too. Your journey, your path isn't going to be right for everybody either. So other people might know just inherently about themselves, I don't have any interest in doing that. I want to go into a studio and just knock it out. Some people may not be able to afford to do that. They have to do it at home. There's benefits to both, and it's probably valuable to try both because you can learn different things from different people.
Yeah, it's hard just to stay in that motivation and just like, I mean, there's so many moments that I've just been like, I'm lost, and I know that that's just so true for so many people my age too, is like, this whole world is about comparing.
Oh God, yeah.
And there's always going to be someone that is doing better, and there's always going to be someone that's younger than you, that's way ahead of you, or even at the same point that you're at right now. And I've definitely learned that as long as you are doing something and just like focus on the moment and focus on what you're just doing, and like songs don't have to stay out there forever, and a lot of the time they don't. And I think just as long as whatever you want to do, just do it. Whether it's playing a show, it doesn't matter where. It's not like, oh, I can't get an email back from this venue that I've been dying to play at. I'm just going to give up, or, I'll just wait till that opportunity. Definitely don't wait. I think just play a show. And then another reason might be, I don't have a band that I can play a show with. I'm, whatever. Then still play a show by yourself, and you'll find someone there, or they'll find you and be like, are you looking for a drummer? Or, hey, or you say, I'm really looking for a drummer, or do you want to just jam? I think just doing stuff goes a lot further, and in turn helps you with planning for the future. Don't just think about the future. Think about what you want to do right now, because in turn that helps you for your stuff going on in the future.
Yeah. Take risks. Put yourself out there.
Crash and burn.
Exactly.
Oh, crash and burn.
Because it's probably not that bad. And the fact of the matter is if it's not good, no one's going to pay attention to it anyways. So it's just going to disappear in the ocean of content that gets put out there, and no one will care, and it'll be gone. And then you just move on to the next thing. Because we all have projects, posts, experiences in our history that were like, not my proudest, right? Stuff that, I'm not going to share with people. That's okay. You can't have the mindset that everything's going to be great, that you're going to put out. Like everything you touch is just going to be awesome. It's just not going to happen. In fact, if you think that way, you're probably putting out things that aren't that good anyways. Like you just have to do your best and move forward. And if you keep doing that over and over and over again, you will make better and better stuff.
Oh, yeah. It's just so nice to like just write and write and write, and then look back and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy that I just wrote all these songs, because this taught me to write these types of songs now that I feel a lot more confident in. And it shows like, it's just nice to hone skills. And the only way to really do that is just by doing it over and over again. Yeah. And also without any expectation either, like you said, of like having it be good. I mean, sometimes all the time, majority of your songs will not be good. And that doesn't mean that you can't perform them, like you can still do whatever you want with them, but don't be so set on them or self-conscious about them, and just create them. And I've written songs where it's just like, okay, I wrote it, never think about it again, or I wrote it, this is bad, I'm not even going to shelve it anymore. I'm literally just going to take this piece of paper, crush it, throw it away.
Right.
And then it's crazy, because then the next song that you might write, you feel so creative and fresh, and then you just write this song that you feel really, really good about. Those moments happen too. And those moments, like the songs that I've put out now, wouldn't have happened without the crushing paper songs.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's move on to a few other pieces of the important pieces of the journey to get to where you're at. Well, let's go to promotion next. So I think you've done a really nice job with your stuff on social media. You show up constantly. You've been, active. How have you thought about social media over the years? Has it changed? How do you plan out what you want to post? Is it all just sort of natural? You're not thinking about it? Or are you very intentional about how you make content?
I think I used to be a lot more intentional. I think what's worked for me is I put out stuff whenever I feel like it, and then I don't put out stuff when I just don't feel like it. And that tends to be a lot more authentic, and that tends to be a lot more engaging. There are certain things where there are planning, like when it comes to bigger projects like live sessions or music videos or live at whatever venue or show posters and stuff. Obviously, that's a little bit more you got to plan ahead. But I think the more common content that just like comes out is just like me just thinking on the top of the head and just like, oh, I'm in a good mood, put this out. And it tends to really do well. I don't know. So that's what I'm trying to do, is just kind of be living in that moment and just being like, what is my tendency right now? I'm going to do that, and then not worry about it, Yeah. Because there used to be a point, and still every day I still get in my head about like, oh, is this a good idea to put out? Like, is this going to engage people or whatever? Luckily, I have enough support so that a lot of people just like whatever I put out or whatever, but it seems to be the more successful stuff is the stuff that I just put out spur of the moment.
Do you think that has to do with just being vulnerable, like not overthinking it and just being yourself?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think that's it. I think putting out authentic content, I mean, people can just see right through that. It seemed like there's different forms and types of content.
Yeah, I think that if
You
you're,
know?
yeah, depending on what kind of content you're making, because obviously if you're curating something that's supposed to be entertaining, it's very intentional,
Mhm.
and then people don't mind, right? If it's
Yeah.
staged in that way, because the goal's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's certain content that's, yeah, you're right. There's certain goals for certain types of content. But I think day-to-day stuff, I don't wake up going, I need to post something today, because I have to check it off the list. I used to do that. I think when like COVID was happening, I would just be like, okay, I got to post a YouTube video today, or I got to, promote my song today. And that just felt very just exhausting. I don't know. Yeah, it definitely depends on the content.
What platform are you most active on?
Definitely Instagram.
Okay.
For sure.
How do you're on TikTok, right?
Yep.
Do you intend to become more active on TikTok?
I think at this moment, I'm trying to treat this like a full-time job. And I think in order to treat something like a full-time job or as like school or something, you have to at least be actively thinking or doing it once a day or daily or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I've just kind of been like, okay, like what kind of content can I make that is just like a daily thing that I like doing anyways, that I need to do anyways, that I can put a video on and whatever. So I'm trying to do that more. Today I didn't do it just because I was doing something else with music,
Yeah.
Or that's kind of the whole idea of just like living in the moment and just kind of what are my urges today. So yeah, I'm open to making more content for TikTok. I know it can't hurt. And a really great feeling too is like people also understand. It's nice to know that people also understand why I'm making content on TikTok as opposed to Instagram, because everyone knows that like there is a certain chance that happens when you put out stuff on TikTok. And a lot of people that I've just built with this fan base or whatever see that and they support that. And they're like, and I'm like, hey, I totally understand that this is like awkward and cringe or whatever, but I'm just going to do it anyways. Hopefully you guys enjoy it, And then those people are like, no, we love it. Please do it. And don't worry that it's cringy because we're here to support you. And, who knows? Like, we're really excited for you to maybe find some success in that. And that feeling is just like, it's really special. And I'm trying to like just keep those ideas and words and everything in my head while the other things of just like, oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. Why am I doing this to myself? Yeah. So that's my relationship that I have with TikTok right now. But I definitely feel like I still am making my performing and songwriting my number one priority because that's where I get the most fulfillment.
Well, I think you and pretty much every other musician.
Yeah.
Right. I want to bring up social media just because what you just described, everybody feels that way. I mean, there's some extroverts out there that are like, I love making content, but not many. I think everyone feels that way. And how you described it, I think is a really, really healthy mindset of do it when you feel like doing it. If you never feel like doing it, then you're going to have to get past that. But
like there's a lot of people that just don't make content and they just have beautiful music and they just play so many shows, and that's the type of person. And that's like that they are very sure in themselves. And it may take a couple more years to do that. But if you do it and just stay true to that forever, I mean, we talked about this earlier. People will find that there is a point where it's like, it can't hurt to try it. But if you just are so sure in yourself that you are not that type of person, people will see that and grow.
That's true. I think that's a tough road if you're not online.
For sure.
But if it's what you have to do, it's what you have to do. I just think that, what you said about ultimately just sort of accepting where you're at, being vulnerable, even speaking to the fans, say, hey, I'm going to try this thing. It feels awkward to me. I hope it doesn't come off that way to you.
Yeah.
It just kind of frees you up a little bit to be like, okay, now that the air's cleared here, let's try this. Mm-hmm. Because for one, I bet a lot of the stuff doesn't come off as cringy to them as it comes off to you.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to be your worst critic more times than not. And I think that's true for a lot of musicians. It's hard to be self-promoting all the time.
I think there is like an aspect though of being self-aware You know, I mean, there's some people that just post all the time, and some people love that. And there's other people that are like, okay, I'm going to mute you, or I'm not going to be a part of this because I don't resonate with that anymore. You know, so a lot of the time when I do say, hey, I'm just doing this, I want people to know that, yes, like I understand that this is just a part of the job, you know, like sometimes it's like, okay, I'm actually really excited to do this, but also just know that like, I'm doing this because I'm trying to find joy in doing it. I'm not doing it to just make content.
Yeah.
At least for me, when I see like my peers or whatever, it's nice to know that their intentions for doing it are a little bit more authentic than just like, I'm going to just, you know, shit post. Yeah. At least for me, when I say, hey, I am aware that this is, you know, this is a lot on your feed. I appreciate you sticking around. This is what I'm going to try. And I think people, when they see that I'm aware of like, okay, I'm trying this because I just want to see what happens, they're a little bit more eager to be like, oh yeah, that's okay for us.
Sure.
At least that's what like dings in my head.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It makes sense. You know, I think the sweet spot's always about trying to figure out something that, and you said this, something that brings you joy, that you actually feel good about making, because there's multiple objectives about why we're posting online, right? It's partly because, yes, we're trying to expand reach. We're trying to have a bigger audience, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to get more people to listen to your music. I'm trying to get more people to listen to a podcast or check out a studio or whatever. It's business. That's one half of it. But the other half is that, you know, you want to find the people that really connect with your music, and they want to find you.
Mm-hmm.
They are looking for good artists that are saying the things that they want, that are playing the music that they already enjoy. They want to find a good show. They're trying to find music that they already enjoy, or, you know, a live show that they can go attend and all of that. So it's not that you're forcing something on them. You're just saying, hey, listen, I have this music. You might also enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just hard to do that in a way over and over again that doesn't feel inauthentic, right?
Totally.
It's when it's like the 20th time you've done doing that, then it stops feeling like a real connection.
Yeah.
And so the sweet spot is, how do you make content that doesn't feel just repetitive?
And that's why I think, going back to, there are certain types of content for certain things, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, the one-time picture of yourself saying, hey, come to the show, blah, 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 something funny, you know, or good morning, hope you have a, you know, great day, something like that. That is more just authentic day to day. This is how I'm feeling today,
Yeah.
as opposed to someone that's creating a video and like kind of a routine of like, oh, come to our shows. We're going on tour. Here's our long list of tour dates. We got to post that every day. Both of those forms of content fit on the landscape, and like, as an artist, you need to make all of those, because, you know, not only do you want just people to, you know, you want people to eventually come to the show and buy the merch and become a fan and, you know, whatever of what you're doing. And you need those longer forms and those other types of the call to action kind of thing. But those call to action things don't work unless, or aren't as successful if you don't have the first like initial, just like, I'm not expecting anything from you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like marketing 101.
You need to have both forms. If all you're doing is saying, go stream my song, like, that'll get old real quick.
Totally.
You're going to need to make other types of content that can entertain in other ways, that whether it's just an emotional connection or being vulnerable or performances, you know, all of the above. You've got to mix it up. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think you need to worry too much about if somebody's like, this is just too many times they're talking about their tour or whatever. Because if they're a fan, they're probably going to be totally cool with it. And if they're not a fan, who cares?
That's exactly what I've realized too.
Who cares?
It's like, if you unfollow me because I'm posting too much or posting my tour or whatever, then clearly you know, it's okay.
You're not that into your music.
Yeah, you're not into my music, and that's fine.
And that's okay, because not everybody's going to be.
Totally.
The fact of the matter is it's just this little flick of a thumb. That's all they have to do, and it's gone.
Yeah.
It won't be in their feed anymore. And most people are totally satisfied just flipping through, because we do all day long. It's easy. We skip tons of posts, and a lot of times it's not personal at all. Just not into it at that moment.
Totally.
So don't take it personally too, right?
Totally.
Keep trying to find your audience. But I do think that you're doing that well. You're showing up. You're trying lots of different kinds of content. Your fan base is growing. You keep getting more opportunities. So stick with it.
Thanks.
You know, things are going well.
Thanks. Yeah.
The other thing I want to talk about on promotion is radio, because you've been doing pretty well with that locally. Can you talk about that process, like how it's happened, how you've pursued it?
A lot of it is just knocking on the door, I guess, initially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess this time last year, one of my songs, Making Me Crazy, got put on rotation, which means it got played every day on the current Minnesota Public Radio. And that was a really cool opportunity that I wasn't expecting. I didn't know how I got it. I still to this day really don't know how I got it.
So you didn't submit for that?
That song, I guess there is the local show.
So you probably submitted for the local show.
I submitted it to the local show, and I'm honestly not sure if they played it or not. Normally they let you know that, hey, we're going to play it on Sunday, whatever. And then that's it, but that's still huge,
Right.
I mean, there was a time where I would just email and I didn't get any response, So then, yeah, I mean, I put out a few songs, and then I finally got like, okay, you'll get it played on the local show. That's great. Put out a few more songs, didn't get any response, And then I put out another song, and then they're like, oh, got it on the local show. Great. Thank you. That song specifically that got played on the local show, I think it was like August. And then I was playing at the state fair for like First Avs goes to the state fair thing. So it's such a cool thing. But what they do is you choose 2-3 songs, and they have this backing band of just like a bunch of local musicians that are a bit older that like learn your songs and arrangement, and then you perform it as kind of like the solo act, and they learn it and do the background harmonies and everything, which is so cool. So I did that, and one of the people in that band was the local show host, Diane, for the current, and they went right up to me and they're like, hey, not sure if you know this, but your song, Making Me Crazy, has been getting played on the current like every day. And I was like, what? like what does that even mean for me? Like, what does that do? Who do I thank?
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, well, thank you so much. And she's like, well, it wasn't my decision. It was like the station managers. And so I ended up getting her email, and I've never spoken to her or anything. And I just said, hey, just wanted to say thank you. I found out from Diane that, this song's been getting played on, heavy rotation and whatever. And then I sent that, and she didn't get back to me. And then I sent it again like 2 weeks later as a follow-up, and she's like, oh yeah, you're playing shows. People are coming to those shows, and you're active in the scene, and we really like the song. So there you go. And then I think that was the last time I ever heard from her, I guess. I don't know. I don't think she's even a part of the current anymore.
Okay.
But that's how that started. And then it went all the way until I think January, February, where it still was getting played once a day. And, we got it into the Chart Show Hall of Fame, which is like, they have this chart show every Thursday night, and people would vote for it. And that was really cool, because I would be able to make this content, and then people would be kind of rooting for me to, stay in and rotation. And then what really, at first I was like, okay, like, this is sweet. Like, I'm able to make this content, and people are maybe like able to listen to it. But I wasn't like getting a lot of like extra follower counts.
That's what I was going to ask in terms of correlation.
Exactly. And so we played Big Turn Music Fest, which is down in Red Wing. And so we got asked to play that in February. And the Current's a big sponsor of that event. And we had that in like mid-February of last year. So I guess beginning of 2023. And we were like third on the lineup of 4 bands at this church. I mean, they have all these venues and shows going on at the same time, just, blocks from each other. And it's a really cool, just meeting people and, oh, I've seen you doing stuff on social media. And now it's like, oh, now we're able to make that connection. So that just on its own is really great. But I remember we were at this church, and the band before us played their set. There weren't too many people there, but I was like, okay, like, cool, can't wait to play. And so we went on stage, got set up. I had my in-ears all figured out, and was trying to, shove everything in, because we had like a 10-minute turnover, 15 minutes, and just really quick and chaotic. So I was scrambling because no one else knew how to work this little, in-ear rig. And then I turned around and, was getting ready to do sound check. And then I look and then, all the pews or whatever they were all filled. It went from like 5 people to like over 100 people.
Wow.
Just in that like 15-minute time frame. And then I look over and I see the local show host there and just like the little current hub was there. And that's when I knew that I was like, okay, this radio play, it must have been the radio play.
Right.
Right. That must have introduced all these people to that. And yeah, that was like one of the moments that I was like, oh my gosh, like this is why this matters.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So that was one of like the very like clear cut ways of like, oh, this is how it can benefit you. There's probably have been other ways that I'm less aware of just like people coming to shows or like, that just like keeping up with like, oh, the current like sponsors, my release show or whatever, those things can't hurt.
Absolutely not.
But that was like the one time where I was like, oh my gosh, like this is like a very clear, like, oh my gosh, this worked. And ever since then, it's just been, I don't know how else it's like really been expansive or whatever, but it's been so cool to kind of build that relationship.
How often are you submitting stuff to radio?
I try to do it every release for sure.
Yeah.
I used to be at a point where one of my mentors gave me a list of just radio station AAA non-coms, like similar to the current. And he was like, just, cold call. And so I did. But that was more when I was starting out. That was probably 4 years ago at this point. And I would just cold call. And the only people that really got back to me were the current, I think KFAI, which is also local. Yep. And then some, small place in where it is. Appleton.
Oh, yeah.
Appleton, Wisconsin. So I just realized just over time, I was like, hey, clearly this isn't worth my efforts, like at least right now, it isn't. So I just focused on just like the smaller areas. So I've just been every single time now, I just reach out to pretty much everyone in Minnesota. I mean, there's like Duluth. I think there's Grand Rapids, Minnesota. So there's that area and then the college radio stations too. And those tend to be the ones that I actually get responses on. Yeah. I am always like reaching for other things too of like, oh, someone said that they came to a show and they're from Boston and they know someone that works at whatever radio station, and so I follow up on that. I'm like, hey, so-and-so told me to reach out.
Yeah, well, it sounds then you are actively following up on any leads and trying cold calls, and
because it doesn't hurt, But yeah, so I definitely tend to make it a part of the route, just not having like any expectations for sure. Yeah. But it's always nice to just be like, hey, I'm gonna be in Milwaukee or whatever, and would love to. This is my song. Do you tend
to email them or call them?
Definitely email. I used to call them, but at this point,
I would think email is probably preferred.
For sure. Yeah. I think so. But it really depends on, even now I still am totally unaware of like who to reach out to. Is it the morning show host? Is it the program director?
It's not always clear. Yeah.
Is it the music director? It's always tricky, but that's just goes around with just like getting coffee with either other bands or other people who are like mentors, or they used to do radio promotion for, their cousin's band or something, and then they've been like, oh, well, this used to work for me, try that.
Yeah.
And then I try it, and if it works, great. If not, then I'll talk to someone else.
Yeah. Just not being scared to just try stuff, and if it doesn't work, it's fine.
Yeah. I've definitely, just from the amount of emails I'm trying, I've definitely learned a system of like how to format the email that's polite, but also gets the point across. That's like efficient, but polite, and just like, not too wordy.
Yep. Keep it short.
Yeah.
Cool, man. I feel like we covered a lot of the pieces that are important. So. What are you working on next? Like, what are you looking at over the next year or two?
The next year or two. I think now, with just being with school done, the plan is just to perform full time, and just do music full time. And for me right now, that means a lot of things. I'm still in the opera, and I'm still interested in doing more musical theater, because that's what I've been doing for the past 4 years in school. That still gets me excited. So I'm going to keep on doing that. Obviously with shows, we have a tour coming up in February, and And then I'm hoping to do another tour in March and go down to Nashville again and work with people that I worked with last summer, do the same thing in LA that I did last summer, and just keep up with those relationships and just keep on creating, keeping on doing. But still also like I think just at this point, like trying to plan ahead a little bit, but also just wake up and be like, what do I want to do today? And what do I need to do today? Like I need to, if I want to do a tour in March, I need to be booking that now. But then there's other things where it's like, okay, I did that. Now I can, vocal warm up and write a song, or I can learn a cover for our tour that we have in February. There's things that I have to do, and then there's other things that I want to do. So I'm trying to just keep on doing that every day. And there is still some structure, like, I'm doing the opera all the way till February. So that is nice. It definitely hasn't settled in that like I am not in school anymore.
You have a lot more free time.
Yeah. I think once mid-January / February hits, I'll be like, okay, this is it. This is what I'm doing. But also there have been certain relationships and certain things that I've finally come together at this moment that give the opportunity to do this more of a full-time thing, just make it more possible. And those things it literally wouldn't have been possible for me to do it with being in school, And so it's really cool to have those things just be like a smooth transition into playing shows consistently, like someone booking me shows all the time now. That's a really cool spot that I've always dreamed of having, but it didn't make sense for at the time. And now it finally makes sense. And now I feel just as an artist and just personally and just figuring out what I like and what I don't like, that opportunity makes sense for what I'm doing right now and what I want to do in the next 6 months. So I'm really happy that it's there.
Nice. So you're working with a booking agent for the foreseeable future, at least. Yeah. Cool.
That's the plan.
Right on. Well, after, kind of reflecting on this conversation and going through all the parts of your journey, what do you feel has been a current thread to your success leading up to this? When you look back at the things that worked for you, that didn't work for you, what would be something that you'd like to pass on to people as a tip, as a secret that might help them save some time, save some money, or just have the right mindset?
I think a big thing that I've heard from so many musicians that are older than me and so many just people is just work with the people around you. Use the resources that you have access to and just create in that way. I think that goes a lot further. And I think, I don't know, there's just like less expectation that comes with that, and a lot of it is just like, that is fun. And then you learn a lot more than just like taking the backseat and just like having it all figured out for you. Cause I know like that's a lot easier when I was growing up and I was like, oh, it's great. Like someone can tell me what to do, and that feels really good sometimes, but there's also a lot of personal development of like, you want to be that person for yourself. The only person that's going to be, it's the classic, the person that's going to trust themselves the most or, believe in themselves the most is themselves. So I think, using your resources, using what's around you, not being afraid of just pulling up GarageBand and creating a track by yourself.
Yeah.
Just for the heck of it. You don't even have to put it out. But if you want to, you can. And then if you're ready to kind of go into the next step of like, okay, I've been performing a lot. People have been asking me like, hey, do you have anything out on Spotify? Like whatever. Then I'm like, I want to give them something, that they can take home and share and all that stuff. Then, maybe think about, okay, maybe it's time to look into a studio.
Absolutely.
And kind of go take that next step.
Yeah.
You might be at that now. You might not be. You might. Yeah. It really just depends on what you want to get out of this. No one's telling you, like, I'm not telling you go into the studio right now. That's what you need to do in order to become the next big thing or do that next step. There's so many people that don't do that, So if you feel that you are capable of doing it in your bedroom and writing songs by yourself and putting that out to the world and you feel that that's authentic to yourself, just do that. Just do something and then you'll learn. You'll learn from those songs and listening to them, 6 months later and being like, I love that. That was so true to myself. I'm going to keep doing that. Or I didn't like that as much. I feel like I could grow in this way. You know? So I'm going to try and surround myself with people and different ways to see and try something else and see if that works for me more.
Yeah. I feel like you sum that up really nicely, that it's kind of just like, take the next step that's available to you now. While it's perfectly fine to plan and have big dreams and do all those things, it's okay to just take the next step that you have available right now, because you don't necessarily know where that's going to lead. It might end up being a new collaboration that has an unexpectedly good result. You don't know, because the people that you're with right now, your colleagues, your peers, other bands you're playing with, you never know which one of those is going to pop off. Or somebody that is insanely talented at something, you don't know. Somewhere along your journey, you might decide, okay, what I have available next to me isn't what I need. And then you might need to look somewhere else. Particularly if you're early on, you probably don't know. You probably just don't know exactly what you need. And that's okay.
That's totally
so just take the next step that's available to you and see where it leads. When you get further down, if you have a clear idea of the people you do need to work with, studio that you want to record in, anything like that, sure. But you don't have to start there. If you want to, that might work too. But it's okay to just do the next thing that you have available right now.
Just do it.
Absolutely.
Right now.
Well, thanks so much, man, for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Where can people find you and connect with you to follow you, check out a show, that sort of thing?
Colin Bracewell. That's pretty much where I am on everything. I have a website, just colinbracewell.com. Yeah, next shows, I mean, trying to stay as open as possible. Of course, there's like shows like the tour going on in February that we're really excited about. But yeah, anything, just look up Colin Bracewell and that should be all there, hopefully.
I'll put your Instagram and website in the
Sweet.
show notes. If you are still listening, still watching, please leave us a comment. Let us know what you liked, what you didn't like. If you have ideas for other topics that you want to go deeper on, I'm all ears. I will definitely listen to any advice. I appreciate everybody for listening. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.